Today, we're going 7 miles off the coast of Key West to scuba dive to Vandenburg. First, a little backstory. To fully understand how we actually got here, we have to jump back to 2015, our wedding day. Okay, so this isn't a YouTube video about our wedding, but after the wedding, I sorta tricked Amanda into getting open water scuba certified. And a year later, we decided to get advanced certified, which allowed us to dive down to 100 feet. Our first big dive after this was at the Vandenburg Wreck site, which was absolutely amazing. The Vandenburg is a 522-foot-long military ship that was intentionally sunk in 2009 to create an artificial reef and improve the habitat for marine life. The ship is located 7 miles south of Key West, rests in 140 feet of water, and is nearly 10 stories high. Our dive guide allowed us to enter the wreck and swim inside the sunken ship. It was like we were frozen in time inside of that thing with all the furniture, stairs, and American flags still hanging. We dove the Vandenburg twice, and this is footage from the first dive. As for the second dive, let's just say that we had such a close call that we haven't done any deep scuba dives since. More on that later. The thing with scuba is that not only are you limited by the amount of air you have in your tank, but also by the amount of no decompression time remaining. You see, the deeper the dive, the more atmospheric pressure your body is subjected to. All of that nitrogen that is mixed in with the oxygen you are breathing goes into your bloodstream and then slowly dissolves. The longer and deeper you dive, the more nitrogen gets taken up into your body. And this becomes a problem when you finish your dive and start to ascend to shallower depths. All that dissolved nitrogen turns into gas because it's under less atmospheric pressure, and if this happens too quickly, you can get decompression sickness, also known as the bends. This was definitely the coolest part of the dive. Seeing this dark bulkhead that was absolutely pitch black inside and just sinking down it like we were astronauts from a movie or something. Some places were so dark that you couldn't see anything without a flashlight. But somehow our guide knew that there would always be a blue light at the end of the tunnel. We would definitely be too scared to do any of this had we been by ourselves. This elevator shaft was so cool to swim over. Amanda is weightless and effortlessly floating over it while looking down at the depths below. Meanwhile, I wasn't so graceful and was furiously paddling with my arms against the current. The area that we were swimming over used to have 2 satellite dishes that were used to track NASA launches off of Cape Canaveral and monitor missile test launches in the Pacific Ocean. They were mainly used in the 1960s and 70s and remained intact until Hurricane Irma came through and destroyed them in 2017. To prevent decompression sickness from happening, divers control their ascent very, very carefully. For a deep dive like this, we ascend hand over hand, slowly, and controlled by hanging onto a rope. The fear is that ascending too quickly can lead to a collapsed lung, or the bends, which is basically the result of air bubbles forming in your blood and can lead to serious injuries. The last part of this slow ascent is a final decompression stop at 15 feet for 3 minutes. Only after this can we safely rise to the surface. This is footage from the second time we dove the Vandenburg. It's true that perfect is the enemy of good, because when we tried reliving our first dive by doing it again, it didn't go so well. It did, however, show us how fragile life can be at depths of 100 feet, which is nearly 3 atmospheres of pressure. If anything goes wrong down there, you better figure it out fast, because you are completely on your own. And if you don't figure it out, well, you could get seriously hurt, or even worse, lose your life. We probably shouldn't have even have done this dive in the first place because the conditions were so bad. Visibility was poor and the current was really strong. You can tell by how fast the bubbles are moving toward the camera. Almost half of the dive group aborted the dive during the descent. These divers here descended right before us and are already turning around. At about 50 feet, I was having problems equalizing my ears, and I had to wait a bit to let them equalize. The visibility was so bad that I quickly lost sight of Amanda and our guide. Even with the flashlight, I couldn't see them. Fortunately, the guide noticed that I was missing from our group, and after a while, he was able to find me. Exceeding the no decompression time is a big no-no, and if you break it, then you're at a higher risk of getting the bends, and you have to make a series of extra decompression stops as you ascend, which consumes more air. During our dive, we got within 1 minute of breaking the no decompression time. My dive computer was alarming to warn me of this. In a nutshell, if you're getting close to breaking this, then you can always rise to shallower depths to extend the dive time because you're under less atmospheric pressure there. I pointed to my dive computer to let our guide know. I wasn't really sure if he understood what I meant because he and Amanda just kept on swimming at their current depth of 90 feet. Taking matters into my own hands, I let go of the railing that I was holding onto and ascended to about 70 feet. When I got there, the current was so strong that I instantly got pulled away. There was nothing I could hold onto there. The harder I swam, the more I got pulled backwards, and the more oxygen I was using. I was down to the last third of air in my tank. I saw Amanda and the guide safely get to the ascent line because they were holding onto a railing the whole time at depths below me. But they kept getting more and more distant, and I couldn't reach the ascent line no matter how hard I swam. The current was pushing me backwards. It was just me and the ocean at that point. No one else. No one else could see me. No one else could hear me. I was all by myself. I had no choice but to do a free ascent from 75 feet with no visual reference cues. I was completely reliant on my dive watch to tell me how fast I was ascending. As you ascend, the air that you carry rapidly expands, and you can easily have an uncontrolled ascent if you're not paying attention. I was also looking for the safety line that was hanging 15 feet below the surface. I couldn't see it, but if I didn't line up and catch this line, the current would have blown me straight out to the ocean, and I probably would have surfaced miles away from the dive boat. The guide was so relieved to see me. We did our 3-minute safety stop, and Amanda and the guide had an extra 3 minutes tacked on because they exceeded their no decompression limit.
So I just want to make one comment, because I saw the edited version of the Vandenburg videos. It kind of looks like me and the guide are just like watching as John is like floating off into space.
It certainly felt that way.
Okay, that's not what happened. So I need to explain that John and I had the same dive computer, and John synced to our settings. So basically anything that his diving computer says, mine is going to say the same thing. And so while John was starting to panic because he was running out of no decompression time, I was as well. Since I was terrified and was always within arm's length of the guide, I had showed him a few times that I was running out of no decompression time, and the guide just kept putting my hands on the rail of the boat and very clearly signaled for me to not worry about it. And I didn't really know what that meant, but I also knew that he knew more than I did, and so I was just willing to trust that that was okay to do.
And in retrospect, that was totally the right thing to do. Because of the visibility, I couldn't see any of this stuff was going on. And kind of as a saving grace, when Amanda and the guide realized that I was floating away, the guide was the one who actually told me to line myself up with that 15-foot safety line. He basically looked up and pointed and signaled for me to use that as a target. And if it wasn't for him, I don't know if I would have been able to come up with that idea on my own. I probably would have just panicked down there.
I would have panicked. In the video, it kind of seems a little bit like we just sort of let John like float off in the distance, and I mean, we did, but there were reasons for that.
And the guide was really my saving grace. He probably just wishes I listened to him and didn't let go of the railing.
But that's John. He always has to make sure that like
I'm in full control.
Completely. Also, I should also say too, is that it really was very good that it was John who had that emergency and not me, because John had all of his own safety equipment. He had one of those like noodles that you inflate that's like a marker, so if he had like landed like 3 miles away from the boat, it would have been easier for us to find him. I had none of that. I didn't even have a snorkel, I don't think. So it would have been really bad. We learned a lot.
We did. We learned a lot.